What's going on, everybody? This is Brent0331, and we got a live stream for y'all tonight. It's been a minute. We took a little bit of a hiatus, about 3 months or so. Just kind of sit back, recock, reorient, and we're here. And we got some blast from the past. So I'm going to go around the horn and introduce everybody. We got the good doc, Dr. Christopher Larson. You guys should know who he is. He's the original founder of the One Shepherd Leadership Institute, going 40 years plus strong. He's a U.S. Army veteran and a doctor. So, Chris, thanks for jumping on tonight.
Hey, great to be back. You're right. It's been a long break, but you know, good rest. And so let's, once we go around the horn, let's jump into it.
Hell yeah. All right, next we got Bruce, a.k.a. Boomer Jr. Check out his channel, Bruce at Camp Armit. And I'm happy to announce, guys, after like a 2-year hiatus, Bruce launched not one, but like 2 videos recently he uploaded to his YouTube channel. So, Bruce, welcome back, both on the stream and on the YouTube community.
Well, thank you. It's good to be back, and looking forward to the stream tonight and seeing a lot of the old names that are in here that usually comment and contribute.
All right. Now we got a special guest tonight. Randall with Grunt Proof. He's back to his Grunt Proof headquarters up in the mountains, undisclosed location. Randall, thanks for jumping on.
Hey, good to be back, man.
All right. And then I got 2 dudes that are guests, but they're UA. So here's guest number 1, UA, Pegasus Test. And guest number 2, that's UA, Jared, with 2 Alpha Solutions. So there's their lovely chairs. And there he is.
I'm here.
Welcome, buddy. We were unauthorized absence.
I was just late to muster, that's all.
All right. So Jared with 2 Alpha Solutions, Navy vet. Thanks for jumping on, brother.
Thank you, buddy.
All right. So here we go, guys. Usually Pegasus Test kicks off the freaking intro, but again, he's UA. So we got 3 topics we're going to hit tonight. We're going to start with Ukraine. Recently, the 2-year anniversary passed. So it's been 2 years that they've been fighting this brutal war over there. So we're gonna kick that around for a while, just discuss that, what's going on, lessons learned, things of that nature. And then when we're tired of talking about Ukraine, we're gonna move on to the Israeli-Hamas conflict that's been going on for a bit. And then when we're tired of that, we'll go to some domestic issues, because God knows in the 3 months that we've had a hiatus, there's a lot of them. So who wants to open the floor?
Okay, I'll take it. I'll do less. Less. Look at me.
Go for it, Doc.
All right. So, yeah, we are at the 2-year anniversary of the war in Ukraine. I've said it many times. I'm going to be a bit of a devil's advocate tonight yet again. And I'm going to champion Russia's success, okay, and their overall performance. I'm going to champion it, but I want to make clear right from the get-go, Russia's the aggressor here. Russia's in the wrong. Ukraine needs to win this war. Russia needs to be, have their ass kicked and sent back to their border. I'm not pro-Russian. At the same time, I'm doing an assessment over the last 2 years. And when you say, is Russia winning this war? Everybody says, well, Russia's not winning the war, but Russia's not losing the war either. Russia's on the offense. Russia's taking ground. Russia's taking their objectives. Ukraine isn't. And this is Ukraine's to lose, right? We're not fighting over Russian territory. We're fighting over Ukrainian territory, or they are fighting over it. And I mean, I don't know how to say this. If you're the opponent in the boxing ring, and you're the one throwing all the punches, and you're the one that's backing up the other opponent, how can we not conclude that Russia's winning? Now, then the apologists will pile in and say, but it's costing Russia so much. And this is true. It is. Look, there's lots of sources out there, but the most middle of the road sources, and frankly, the ones that back their claims with, good data, somewhat reliable data. And I say that somewhat because, of course, Russia's going to hide their casualties. Of course, Ukraine is going to hide their casualties. There's a myriad of reasons to do so. And so it's very hard to see, what losses are. But for Russia's gains, it's lost 315,000 casualties. We estimate 75,000 of those are dead. Compare that, and I know attrition isn't everything. In fact, it's not even my first go-to, right? But we have to measure something. So we can measure actual geographic space, and we can measure the costs of that. And it has cost Russia 315,000 total casualties with 75,000 dead, and something along the lines of 25-ish armored combat vehicles. Now, we can break those down, actually, I think that's just main battle tanks alone. And then we can break down, I think it's 10,000 combat vehicles. We can break those down. But the point is, that's what it is. Now, flip side, Ukraine has lost, what is it? I think the last I heard is something like 220,000 casualties, something like 45,000 dead, plus another 10,000 civilians dead. And they've lost 800 plus main battle tanks and 5,000 or 6,000 combat vehicles. My point here is, you don't need to write those down. Those are big picture numbers. Here's the point. Ukraine is losing, and Ukraine is losing people, and Ukraine is losing vehicles and combat equipment that it can't replace. Certainly can't replace it on its own. It's completely and utterly dependent on its allies. That's hardly true at all for Russia in any of those metrics. And so Russia continues to take ground. Russia continues to take the fight to Ukraine. And Russia continues to win. And though it's losing more people and equipment than Ukraine is, this is a game of attrition that Russia can win. They know it. So here's my point. My point, I guess, is twofold. Number one, first and foremost, the world needs to sit up and pay attention. Europe and NATO need to pay attention to this. America needs to pay attention to this. And all the keyboard jockeys online, you're not helping at all by painting Ukrainians as supermen who can, just chew tobacco and spit and take out Russian main battle tanks. That's a lie. It's always been a lie. Ukrainians are not superior fighters or capability than Russia. Ukraine is on the defense. And the advantage always goes to the defense. There's nothing surprising about what Russia is doing. It's called victory.
I mean, it's just, from my perspective, it's just a pure numbers game. I mean, the Ukrainians have had multiple mandatory conscriptions of, people from all the way up to guys like in their 40s to 50s. I mean, they're running out of people. They're running out of armament. They can't. I mean, Russia. I saw something the other day where Russia produces more artillery shells than all of NATO combined. I mean, the numbers alone are on the Russian side.
Right, an American 155 round. Now, admittedly, vastly superior in quality, but both of them go boom. Okay, America 155 round averages $2,000 a round. Russia's averages $200 a round. That's a game they can play.
Not to mention that they're getting shells from the Chi-Coms, the North Koreans.
Right. So I don't know. And Advitka, you hear about the loss at Advitka, and everything we're hearing from the Ukrainian side is, guys, we ran out of ammo. We had a tactical retreat because we were out of ammo.
Well, the exact same thing happened there that happened at Bakhmut. The Russia's figured out. It's taken them this, excuse me, it's taken them this long to figure out that a quick victory is just not possible, that they're going to have to be in it for the long haul, and that a very slow, creeping, bloody, costly encirclement, village to village, town to town, is what it's going to take to have any kind of victory at all. And to Doc's point, yes, you can look at Bakhmut, you can look at Avdiivka and say that they've had some successes there, and Russia certainly has, but they're at a giant net loss from where they were in the beginning of the war. I mean, they rolled through most of that country before they started losing ground. I mean, just the territory that they lost in Kherson alone a year ago, these little towns that they're taking, they are victories and absolutely, but they're at a giant net loss. My concern is, I've got a couple of concerns here, and one I really thought about today when I was looking at watching just some of the media and the discussion about us sending them more money. Anytime that you're in a war like that and you're dependent on someone else for whatever, it could be for anything, that is not going to be a blank check indefinitely forever. You have to know, regardless of what side you're on or what area it is or what you're trying to get, you have to know that eventually that aid may be cut out. It may be slowed down. Other things happen in the world, and for whatever reason, those countries that were supporting you are going to have to cut back their support. You have to know that going into it. And if you know that going into it, then you get yourself on a militaristic economy so that as quickly as possible, you can fight a war without needing that much support. As long as you're getting it, well, that's fantastic. But as it starts dwindling down, you have one of two options. You've either got your shit together and you're able to fight a war and supply a war with enough equipment, men, and material to continue to win that war, or you're going to be facing defeat. And I'm really afraid that that's the situation that Ukraine is in. Now, I will not go anywhere near as far as to say defeat, but if they can't take territory, then they are not winning in this war because they are at an overall net loss. I mean, they're talking about wanting Crimea back and all the land that belonged to Ukraine. And let's say 5 years or 6 years ago, they got a long ways to go to get there. And I just haven't seen them working an economy, a wartime economy, producing the type of equipment and material that they need to produce if someone like the U.S. just cuts back. I mean, everyone right now is talking about this next however many billions we're talking about giving them, right? Great. Let's say we give them that tomorrow. Where are they going to be a year from now? What is their plan for victory? Yeah, they hold out another year, kill a whole bunch of more Russians, destroy a whole lot of more Russian material, embarrass the Russians a bunch more. That's all great. But if Russia's still there in this same strategic position, when that money runs out, then what? I believe we are going to be less and less likely to contribute unless something seriously changes, something like a Russian attack on a NATO country or something to that effect. It's going to take something to get the American populace. And this is where the money comes from. We've talked about this a lot of times. It's one of the problems of being a republic or a democracy. The military arm can't do what they need to do and want to do without the support of the people. We've seen this time and time again. And as all those soccer moms start taking down the Ukrainian flag off their Facebook and putting up the Jewish flag or whatever the next cool thing is, that translates to money and support in the end.
So you just kind of hit on this, like what does victory look like for Ukraine? I mean, are they going to drive the Russians completely out of their land? Like that's not going to happen. They don't have 3-1 to launch that, offensive. They don't have the manpower to do that. Not only that, the Russians haven't been sitting there with idle hands. They've been digging and made elaborate fighting positions, elaborate defenses, mined the living shit out of everything. I mean, every inch of that land is covered, and we saw that with the last Ukrainian offensive that they launched. It didn't succeed much at all. They didn't gain much ground. What does victory look like for them? And I'm gonna talk about we always talk about the Russo-Finnish war and how well the Finns did against the Russians. Well, in the end, even though they kicked a lot of ass, they had to concede a lot of their land. They didn't technically win, right? They performed amazingly in battle, but in the end, they conceded land to the Russians. So you could say the Russians won that fight, regardless of how well they performed in combat. So what is the end state here? Because our side, from the United States, it's like, nope, no surrender, Ukraine. You better not surrender. Here's more fucking money. Well, what's the end state? You're just gonna throw money at that? Like
Ukraine's going to run out of bodies far faster than Russia ever will.
Right.
Yeah. Right. As a matter of fact, so that's several things. You want to look at data points. You say the first year, and this was Ukraine pulling the Finnish, winter war, right? This was that first 12 months. Ukraine not only withheld the enemy, not only withheld the Russians, but then, as we are all saying, turned around and took the vast majority of the land back, right? Just this huge swath of land that they took back. And here's another metric in the first 12 months. There were 15,000 Russian casualties a month. The second 12 months, there's 13,000 casualties a month. Doesn't sound like a huge difference, but it adds up differently. And Ukraine didn't take back any significant land in that last 12 months. If anything, you'd have to give, a slight upper hand, a very slight, but an upper hand nonetheless to Russia. So you're right. All of these are the right questions. This is looking at not just an attrition of humans, but an attrition of money, of material. I remember a year ago or so, everybody was laughing at Russia because they're pulling out 1970 trench diggers and 1960s mine throwers. And we're all like, what are you doing? And Russia just looks and says, winning. So, we keep saying, oh, well, Ukraine is humiliating Russia. Look, Russia's got its humiliation. And let's just, for a second, talk about their Navy's performance, right? Humiliation. On the other hand, when it comes to the ground fight, we're kidding ourselves. We're deluding ourselves. Russia isn't embarrassed. They know damn good and well they're performing well.
Les, Randall?
Well, I'll jump in. I think after 2 years, we can say certain things. I had to jump out for business there, so if I cover any that you guys already said, I apologize. I think after 2 years, the fight now is over Crimea. That is the prize. The Ukrainians are trying to get Crimea back. And I think if they get Crimea back, they'll call it good. All their strikes are against Crimea. They are hammering the Russian Navy to the point, as Doc said, it's absolutely humiliating. I mean, Putin's losing a naval war to a guy who has no ships. The air war I find to be very interesting in one that the Ukrainian Air Force still exists. That's one thing. The second thing I find that while all the losses that are being inflicted on it, the Russians are able to make good on, but just barely. I saw a report last week that for all the planes Russia lost, they replaced and only added 10 more in addition to that. That is the only word I can come up with. That is pathetic. The ground war, yeah, the Russians are holding. They may not be embarrassed. They don't have the ability to push either. The fact that they're calling out the older tanks and the fact that they're celebrating today that they killed an Abrams. They killed one Abrams and they're celebrating. By now, of the 31 Abrams we sent them, they should all be gone if they're doing true armored warfare. And just to sidebar on that, everybody on the news, they're all wringing their hands that an Abrams got blown up. Big frickin' deal. Correct me if I'm wrong, Doc, but during the airline battle, we were estimating we'd be losing 200 a day had the Soviets come through the Fulda Gap. Yeah, so the war is essentially a stalemate. Ukraine's got an advantage on the water. I'd say they have a slight advantage in the air just by the fact that they exist in the air. Because look at it right now, NATO has not supplied them any real aircraft. Yes, some of the former Eastern Bloc countries have given them a few MiGs and Sukhois here and there, but that's just a few dozen fighters at the most. And patting myself on the back, I think it proves my theory back when this whole thing started that if we sent the equivalent of the Flying Tigers over there with about 80 of the Mirage F1s that the various aggressor forces use for the Air Force training and all those Top Gun pilots, that the situation in the air would be very, very different right now.
Sure, but I mean, I agreed with all that. It is stalemated. There's no question about that. But I guess the question that Brent was asking was, at least at some point, is what does the end look like? Actually, to be more specific, Brent asked, how does Ukraine win? And I know what the answer is. Like, the Ukrainian answer is we win in 2025 or 2026 when enough of the Western, aircraft and tanks and, all these other equipment gets here. So, and we're trained up on it. And then we can go, be an American force against the Russians, and we'll defeat them then. That's highly improbable. So what it really looks like, oh yeah, it's turning into a world war just in a very tiny space. It really is. Yeah. But anyway, what I think the end state, Brent, isn't. I'm sorry. I want it to be a Ukrainian victory. Ukraine's, has sovereign territory that Russia's on. I want a Ukrainian victory. I think the realist in me says, look, if I'm going to gamble on odds, then the odds say it's going to be a stalemate. It's going to be a DMZ. Russia's not going to get everything that they want, but they're going to get most of what they, Russia has had a moving goalpost anyway. We're going to take all of Ukraine. Okay. We're not going to take all of Ukraine, but we're going to take these 5 provinces. Okay. Well, we're not going to take all these 5 provinces, but we're going to take elements of 3 and keep 2 or whatever it is. They'll make up something new tomorrow, but they'll find a point where they say, we have victory. They'll dig in. There will be a demilitarized zone, probably, with the UN involved and all this other stuff. And this will still take years and lots more death before I think both belligerents come to that realization that, this is a stalemate. We aren't going anywhere. Now, do I hope I'm wrong? Of course I hope I'm wrong. But Brent, I really think that's what the end looks like in 2026 or 2027 when Ukraine finally realizes F-16s and M1 Abrams aren't going to help them that much.
Yeah, I think it's a negotiated settlement, and the fight is over Crimea. That's the big enchilada, because the Russians want those ports. The Black Sea is almost useless to them without them, and that has a lot to go into with oceanographics and everything, deepnesses of harbors, freezing over. There's no other harbors in the Black Sea that can do what Sevastopol and the other ones can do that are on the Crimea Peninsula. So sure. He who controls that peninsula controls the best ports. That's why Ukraine wants it back. That's why Russia wants to keep it. If they lose it, that'll probably be enough to force the settlement.
Yeah, I think if the Ukrainians can actually take Crimea, all the other provinces that they were only a land bridge to Crimea. What's the point?
And if you look at what's happening, it's the naval war against Crimea. The air battles are happening over the Sea of Azov, which is how you'd start to cut off Crimea. The ground offensives were in the area of Crimea. That's the end goal for both sides. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
What do you got, Randall? You've been quiet.
Listening and learning. I don't know. I kind of look at it like our recent history of these insurgencies, proxy wars and stuff. Like I kind of wonder not when Ukraine has won, but when they have lost. They can't do this on their own, and Americans are getting tired of wondering where the fuck our tax dollars are going. So that's a good measurement. Like, what are your measurements for success? When is this NATO thing happening? What the fuck is the rest of Europe doing? And how long is America going to be the main backer of this? After Iraq and Afghanistan, a lot of Americans are starting to wonder if we should be involved in the rest of the world. It's for a good reason. I mean, there's a lot behind that, but if Americans are out supporting Ukraine, it's over. If the NATO thing doesn't happen, it's probably over. So that's kind of my thoughts and my experience in Europe. You're starting to see a lot of the politicians and some of their social medias from their official governments pushing out all these pro NATO things, and we're getting strong and building all this shit and everything. But I've trained with a lot of those guys. They're the actual dudes, like the grunts on the ground. They're fantastic soldiers, but are European countries, ready for war? I don't think so. So if America's gone, who steps up for Ukraine? I don't think Europe will.
I think you're 100% correct, Randall. And it's not that NATO won't step up; it's NATO can't step up. As you analyze the data of the tanks being used in Ukraine, they like the Leopard 1 and the Abrams and the Challenger way back more than the Leopard 2, which is supposed to be one of the greatest tanks in the world. And you're finding out the problem is the Germans just don't have the spares for them. That's what they're not liking about the Leopard 2. When they break down, they can't repair them. And it's been leaking out that, the Germans don't have the spares. And if you listen and really dig, that's the complaints you're getting from the Swedes. That's the complaints you're getting from the Finns and everybody else who's using Leopard 2s is the Germans are slow on the spare parts.
Yeah, and the training. I have a buddy of mine, some of you guys know, he's in Eastern Germany right now, and that's where they're rotating a lot of these people through, like officers, maintenance guys, crew members and stuff, to train on a lot of this equipment that's being sent over there. And it's so hard to teach these guys how to use our stuff. What I heard the most successful program was teaching them the Javelin and a lot of this drone stuff. But, Germans have historically been that way. Their shit in World War II, most advanced in the world, but they just couldn't produce it enough. And it, when it breaks down, it's dead weight. Meanwhile, we have 4 to 5 Shermans for every one of their Tigers, So, that's what I've been hearing is it's very slow and hard to teach people our stuff, or anybody else's stuff. And the maintenance issue is a freaking nightmare.
They got to have the bodies to man these systems too. I mean, they could have all the Abrams and Leopards all they want. If they don't have the bodies to man these vehicles, they're just sitting in a parking lot somewhere.
And that goes back
they're
to
trying to rotate these guys through. These guys are stretched thin, these Ukrainians. So they're rotating them through into Germany if they can get the bodies to train on this stuff. And so they come do some classes, get a little bit of a breather, and then they got to head right back over there. It's very demanding.
Yeah, I also find there's a political aspect to this. Like, for example, we sent 31 Abrams tanks. We easily could have added a 0 to that without any effort. That wouldn't have hurt us. I'm sure we have 310 sitting in a depot somewhere from the last division we deactivated. We could totally do that. And I'm sure if we didn't want them to have our most advanced Abrams, we could make some deal with the Egyptians to have the Egyptians start cranking out the Abrams we let them make at the factory in Cairo. I'm sure we could make that happen. Same with fighter jets. Go look out at Davis Moth, and we could pick the type, name the jet is sitting out there by the dozens and the hundreds that we could send them if we wanted to. We clearly don't. It's clearly we don't want Putin to win. We just don't want him to lose either.
Hmm.
Well, that goes back to your military industrial complex. As long as the spigot's open, as long as we can keep producing new equipment and using up new equipment, that lines a lot of pockets for a lot of corporations and a lot of senators and congressmen and women and whatnot too. That's kind of a whole nother deeper topic, but it's one of the maybe downfalls of again being in the democracy or republic like we are. I want to because you guys kind of touched on this, but we had a super chat. I think it came in after his comment, which was, from the U.S. perspective, what can we learn from basically what's going on over there while we're sitting here? And that's really what we're talking about, right? I mean, I've not been over there. I don't have any stake in that game, really. But I think that you guys were touching on a point that I think is important, which is what's going on with Western militaries, whether it's Germany or the United States. Let's just talk about the big one. So much of what we have is superior equipment, from the rifle to technologies that we don't even know about here, space age stuff, right? However, it takes a tremendous amount of support to keep it up and running. And when you start slamming that stuff into trenches and mud and frozen ground, and you're putting it in troops that maybe aren't the most highly trained and have the most experience, you start running into the exact same problems that happened to Germany in World War II. Everybody likes to joke about how German stuff's over-engineered and overbuilt. It was cutting edge on almost every level, from the rifle to the tank to the aircraft to rocket technology. Almost no one will dispute that, but it didn't win them a war. There were a lot of guys that they spent tremendous amount of time trying to keep tanks up and running, while the Russians had stuff that, you know, you could fix with a hammer and send it down the road. Wasn't as good, but they could produce more of them. And in the end, that sort of made the difference. And I think that one of the things that we're learning from the Ukrainian war, at least that I am, is that, and I hope that a lot of Americans that watch this, sit back, I hope that they learn this too. This is where we can take it on a personal level. Going out and spending $3-4 grand on a rifle with an optic that holds sub MOA at 300 yards, that's not really that important. If the guy across from you has a rusty old AK, but the determination to kill and the physical fitness to be out in that cold, in that mush for weeks on end, be able to eat just a little bit of food here and there and keep going. I mean, what those guys are going through in those trenches with wet feet all the time. And this covers warfare. You can go back as far as you want to go. All of that stuff is so much more important than what brand red dot you've got on your rifle. If you can have it all, that's great. But I think that we need to look at a realistic scenario of what we've got. And if you're out in the field for a long time and you've got no support, what are you going to do about batteries? What are you going to do about these other technical things that you've got that might give you a little edge if everything were equal? But Mother Nature's a bitch, and she'll grind that stuff up for you quicker than anybody. I think, and I'm not sure if Doc, you were saying this or if you would disagree with me, but it seems like the Ukrainians wanted all the little shiny stuff, but now they're realizing some of the older technology actually works better for them in their situation.
Wait, so I want to pile on that, because I'm going to say something that sounds like I'm saying the same thing, but I'm not, because I agree with what's been said here. What's been said here is this, on a circuit court, driving, which performs better, a Lamborghini or, a Chrysler minivan? And it's an obvious loaded question. We know the Lamborghini performs better. How many Lamborghinis do you see in the wild? How many do you see at the Kmart doing grocery shopping? Right, because it's really good at what it was designed for, but it will never carry the soccer team to practice. Okay, it's just not what it does. Right? So America builds Lamborghinis, and the rest of the world builds Chrysler minivans. And this is so we're saying, our equipment is better, but it takes so long to learn. Let's stop on that point. I don't have the data in front of me, but this is an honest to God venture to guess. I'm giving you my honest to God guesstimate. I would say that the average M1 Abrams crewman in the United States Army has about 2 years of training experience. The average crew commander, probably 5 to 6 years of training experience on that M1 Abrams. Now, I'm not saying it takes 2 years or 6 years to be that good, but then again, it doesn't take 5 weeks either. And so this is the problem. When you issue everybody Lamborghinis, it's the training time that let's pretend you do have. Let's pretend that you're Russia and you have all the manpower you need. You can't just throw those guys in and say, hey, I gave you 5 weeks of training, go do it. Now, when it came to the F-16, lo and behold, America recognized this and said, well, we got to train those pilots for a year before we can throw them out there with an F-16. But of course, we don't say that about being, tank gunnery and, and IFV gunnery. And oh, by the way, then learning not only how to do your job, but how to do it as a team, and then, shoot those ranges, and then learning how to work as a platoon and a company and a battalion and a combined arms brigade. No, guys, that takes years plural, to learn that.
Of course, they can admit that, Doc, because if the tank took as much time to train up and be as proficient as the fighter pilot does, then why does the fighter pilot have to be an officer?
And paid so much better and everything else. But here's what I'm going with this. Bruce said, what are the lessons we need to take? Well, there are many lessons we need to take out of Ukraine, but one is you don't get the quality of people quickly. We know this about pilots. We know this about special forces. We pretend that it's not true about infantry and artillerymen and cavalrymen. Only, lo and behold, it is true. It is true about those lowly combat arms guys if you want them to be successful. Now, if you don't give a shit and you're just saying, no, I just need human waves. I know you're going to die. Just go. I'll send more people. Sure. That'll do for a while. It's a stopgap. But this is what we need to learn is we don't have the proper recruiting. We can't meet our recruiting goals year in, year out. And the government keeps cutting our military. We know that our military is undersized. Yet we can't, even with the undersized cuts, we still can't meet recruiting. What are we going to do in a war? Well, what? We're going to throw them together and say, don't worry, we'll have a whole new brigade for you in 6 months. Matters of fact, we'll have 200 new brigades for you in 18 months. They're not going to be any quality.
What we would try.
Right. I hope you're giving them M4 Shermans, because they're not going to understand how to use that thermal sight, and lock in with close air support and do combined arms fire. They're just not going to know how to do that. We built Lamborghinis.
Well, and
it's like
where do the bodies
was right.
come from?
Tank's most powerful weapon is its engine.
I'm sorry, what?
Guderian was right. Tank's most powerful weapon is its engine.
What'd you say, Randall?
We got equipment and everything, but where do the bodies come from? They're conscripting guys and trying to force people to serve. What's the population of Ukraine?
And that's what I was saying earlier,
Russia's.
is that Russia has such a huge population base compared to Ukraine that it's going to be Russia's just waiting out Ukraine. And I think the only way that Ukraine's going to come out winning this is if NATO really starts to up its game and actually put boots inside of Ukraine, not necessarily on the front lines, but operating different systems behind the lines, and a little bit more of a support role. And it might come down to the individual fighter going to the front line from NATO too. I don't think Ukraine has the population to be able to push them back out.
And Europe is, dude, they're the guys who serve there are awesome. But the average European, like most Germans I know, they're talking about supporting Ukraine and stuff. And I'm like, fucking go there. You can volunteer easily being a European citizen. Oh, no, that's not for me. And a big thing with that is everybody talks about these European utopias with their healthcare and socialization and everything. These people would be broke as shit if we weren't funding their security and holding up NATO forever. And remember, Trump got in trouble for mentioning that and saying all these countries need to fucking pay their bill. And everybody was shocked and calling him an asshole. Well, now here we are. Lesson learned. Maybe you should have listened to that and considered your own security. But, I watch the news and, pay attention to stuff there. They're still talking about COVID and climate change and useless shit. So the guys who are in those militaries, yeah, they're badass dudes, but they there's no bodies to serve. And then who funds that? You know, Germany's awesome healthcare system everybody believes in, that's gone if they have to put money into a military. Their Bundeswehr, the army's like 100,000, if that. You know, they don't have pilots to fly their freaking jets. You know, they don't have mechanics to get their jets running. So this European NATO thing, like, and the civilian support, I don't think is there. That's 100% anti-war. Even if Russia's freaking marching to Paris, they'll be talking about COVID and climate change.
You're 100% right, Randall. I've noticed the interesting dichotomy of Europe. You have the closer a nation is to Russia, the more serious they're taking it. You see the Finns, what they're doing. You see the Estonians, what they're doing. What the Poles doing are absolutely amazing. You know, they're buying anything and everything they can get their hands on. You see the Slovaks and the Czechs starting to stand up. You start looking at the original NATO nations, and the only two that I see stirring and reacting to this are the UK and Norway. I mean, the worst nation spending ways in NATO right now is Spain. I think we're just recently giving us crap about Trump's comments. The Italians aren't much better. The Greeks are only making their commitment because it's part of their loan to Germany that they have to meet their NATO equipment, which I find ironic, with Germany not coming close to making their NATO commitment, is holding somebody else accountable to do that.
Yeah, I did a lot of training missions over in Eastern Europe and like Latvia, right up there next to Belarus. We did Saber Strike a whole bunch and talking to those people. You know, the communist stuff didn't end when the wall came down. I was talking to officers and other guys, and they're talking about stories from their childhood in the 90s, late 90s. They're talking about murders and rapes and all this stuff happening, you know. So they're, like you said, they're taking that shit seriously. Poland, every time I did a mission in Poland, you know, I'd meet with some provincial governors and like local people, and they're like, dude, we want American bases here.
I got some liberty in Poland once, and those people were great, man. They loved us.
It's the most conservative nation you'll find in Europe, I think. But the Czech Republic, they have kind of like a constitutional carry now. Similar, the closest thing Europe can get. So I don't know.
I do want to kind of steer conversation for Ukraine before we wrap that up and then move on to the next topic. But I do want to talk about some lessons learned, because I mean, goddamn, we've seen some amazing stuff come that we can extrapolate from this conflict. Obviously, you have the increase on unmanned aerial vehicles usage in this conflict. Now, I keep seeing how people talk about UAVs and they act like these things are brand new. We've never seen them, and like you can't do anything as an infantryman on the ground anymore because of them. No, that's completely fucking bullshit. Like, are you watching the same videos coming out of Ukraine? Like they're fighting in trenches, like World War I style. There's literally throwing hand grenades at each other and going hand-to-hand combat. Like, no, infantrymen are very much still in the fight, right? UAVs and drones and all that stuff have just enhanced capabilities, and people adapt. People adapt to whatever the new conditions are on the battlefield. And talking about the UAVs and watching how they operate, like these things don't fly around the battle space with immunity. One thing I don't see people talking about is electronic countermeasures. Like these drones aren't flying with immunity over into Ukraine and just flying around the capital of Kyiv and dropping grenades in there. Why? Right? Why is that? They're not immune to anti-aircraft fire, like no other aircraft, unless you were talking about the Ukrainian Air Force still existing. Well, there's a reason for that. They're not flying sorties against Russian equipment behind Russia's lines, right? The second they come in range of Russian anti-aircraft, anything, surface-to-air missiles, they get lit up. So they can't even fly into that airspace. Same is true with the Russian stuff.
It's basically World War I with high tech.
Right. So the airspace over the front lines is pretty much locked down. You know, we got a buddy, Logan, that's over there right now, and he was telling us, because we brought this up recently, and he pretty much confirmed that, like, yeah, airspace is locked down, but he still saw a Russian aircraft like fly a sortie on, you know, some of their lines, and he said that dude has balls of steel. He's talking about the enemy's aircraft, right? He's like, that dude, without a doubt, got lit up, but probably caught somebody sleeping at a radar system somewhere, you know? So yes, it happens, but for the most part, like we've seen how in modern combat zones can be locked down in terms of, you know, turning airspace into no-fly zones because of the, you know, surface-to-air missiles, the man pads, the anti-aircraft artillery, like the whole gamut. So there's that. We've seen that artillery is still king of battle. This conflict right now is still an artillery fight. HIMARS is fucking doing some amazing shit down there. Now everybody in Europe wants freaking HIMARS systems. We've seen the Russian equivalent. I think it's called the Grad. Right? Yeah, I've seen the Russian equivalent. I mean, they're taking out whole grid squares with their fucking rocket systems. So, you know, we've seen the prevalence of rocket artillery. And because of some of these systems that have been able to detect things better, because of the UAVs and the drone assets, we're seeing camouflage on all different spectrums play a much bigger role, right? We're also seeing the use of decoys. Okay, you can't hide because you got big fucking open farmland, and where are you going to put your artillery? There's only so many like fucking hedgerows that you can hide your shit in. So how do you hide? Oh, well, you put fucking 3 or 4 different decoyed M777s out, and then you have your real one mixed in the bunch, and hopefully the Russians use their cruise missiles to take out those before they hit your real stuff. So we've seen a lot of lessons learned come out of this conflict that are absolutely applicable to us. And, you know, them using some of our weapon systems, we're seeing the effectiveness and confirming the effectiveness of our weapon systems at play. So, unfortunately, it's at the expense of human lives, but it does help us in the long term when we think about what is America getting out of this conflict in terms of defending our own nation and our own interests. So that's my 2 cents on that. Rant over. Somebody pick up the torch. Damn.
I will. I feel like I'm talking too much, and you know, that's kind of my modus operandi.
No, not you,
well,
Doc.
thanks. Anyway, no, I think the big lessons are that war remains brutal, very, very physical. It's still very much a human endeavor, and then, you know, the other thing is that it's an industrial race. So I think, you know, again, all of our precision weapons, we thought when we're teaching them how to use our artillery and weapon systems, all of these things, and we're thinking, well, these are precision weapons. You only need to fire one. And they're like, we're firing hundreds a day. And they're like, what are you doing? And they're like, well, we have that many targets. So I think this is, you know, there were assumptions as we got farther and farther away from industrialized war, as we got farther and farther away from maneuver warfare, and we had to fight counterinsurgency after counterinsurgency. There were myths that we just started believing. And unfortunately, I think that's my takeaway is, wow, tank warfare, maneuver warfare, still a thing. Trench warfare, positional warfare, still a thing. You know, look, yes, it's still an industrial warfare, loitering munitions and drones. Absolutely. You know, it's one more form of artillery, one more form of close air support, right? I'm not taking away from them. I'm just saying they're part of a myriad of things that you need. And in the end, you need enough human bodies. Well, that's been true for 10,000 years. And so we're going, all of our myths that we've developed in the last 30 years of counterinsurgency aren't panning out in industrialized warfare.
Yeah, this seems common to us in the United States, is we always think we won't encounter something again. You know, after the Second World War, all wars were going to be nuclear. And if they were fought on land, they would be fought in the Central European plain. And we had to relearn jungle warfare in Vietnam. And Doc and I learned all kinds of stuff that's really good for fighting in a jungle. We learned about patrol bases and camouflage and small unit tactics, which to a certain extent are pretty fucking useless in the middle of a desert. And then we fought and had a massive victory in the desert in the 1990s and assumed all wars would be like that, and drew the worst possible lesson, which is we watched everything cool on TV. We thought we'd have minimal casualty wars. You know, I said it many times on this live stream that, you know, during Desert Storm, Saddam managed to kill exactly 0 Americans with a rifle. You know, we killed more of ourselves by accident, and we began to think we were invulnerable.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, look at just the news today about one Abrams being destroyed, and it's a top news story. A couple months ago, a Challenger was finally killed. Big news story. And we're talking about one of each type of tank. You know, and the world's amazed that Leopard 2 wasn't the be-all, end-all to all of Ukraine's problems. And we, as Doc said, armored warfare is still a thing. Air dominance is still a thing. Sea denial is still a thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and someone just on the comments commented that, hey, we need to do FPV drones, you know, first, you know, all that stuff, attack drones, loitering munitions. I'm going to agree with you with a very, very big asterisk at the bottom of that. Yes, we need those things. But we also need more, 155 shells. We also need, more HIMARS. We also need more radios and rifles. But because it is industrial, and this idea that, well, the newest shiniest gadget is what we've been saying here tonight is, yeah, those are important, but they're always temporary advantages. And what you come back to is humans. You know what I need more than any new loitering munition or the latest, greatest, sniper rifle? I need trained combat arms guys. I need trained infantry, trained artillery, trained cavalry, trained combat engineers, trained attack helicopters. I need trained people, and I need enough of them. And that far outpaces our need for shiny new toys. But shiny new toys are part of the mix.
Hey, real quick, just
go ahead, bro.
Guys, Randall had to drop out to go take care of some business. He might come back later. Let's try to wrap up Ukraine. Let's just go around the horn with Les, then Doc, Jared, Boomer Jr., and then I'll round out Ukraine, and then we'll move on to the next topic. Since we're almost at an hour here. Go ahead.
Well, as I said earlier, I believe the Ukraine goal is to retake Crimea. Every operation they have undertaken seems to definitely be in that vein. All the air attacks are having there. The fantastic thing of being able to take down 2 Russian AWACS, that's to the north of Crimea. All the naval stuff's to the west of the Crimean naval bases. They're making the naval bases in Crimea almost untenable to the point that the Russians, if they can't use them, may have to abandon them. I don't see any Ukrainian operations in the north of their country in those provinces other than holding action. So I think the big goal is to take Crimea. If they take it, I think they're willing to sacrifice the other territory. On the other hand, I think if Crimea is lost to the Russians will do everything they can to take it back. And if they can't, that's when they'll make peace.
You're muted, Doc.
There we go. Okay. My spin is this, that Ukraine was always the underdog, that they are fighting something that is vastly bigger than them. By the most meager assessment, it's a 1 against 5. More realistically, it's probably 1 against 7, 1 against 8, depending on exactly what we're talking about. But Ukraine is dwarfed by its neighbor, Russia. So if I've sounded anti-Ukraine, I don't mean to. I think what they've done is admirable. Their performance has surprised all of us the first year, and I think the criticism, over the last 12 months has been, hey, why haven't you been as, successful as you were that first 12 months? Well, that's just a diminishing expectation, The point is that I'm very impressed with the Ukraine fighting force and what Ukraine has done as a nation. All of this to say, they were always dwarfed. And I hate to say it, but what I think is going to happen here in the not too near future is they will continue to go through this meat grinder and then negotiate some kind of ceasefire and DMZ situation. And I don't see how, without a massive change to the world structures, I don't see how Ukraine comes out on top on this one.
Well, I'll say this slightly different take on it, because I just also in response to a bunch of the comments, that Ukrainians have nowhere else to go, and Russia is the aggressor pushing into a country that's not theirs. It's a little different, but they've had their Afghanistan, and they could say what we said in Vietnam, that we won every battle. They won most battles. But in the end, the people who were fighting against them had nowhere else to go. There's always, regardless of how much support you have, supply you have, as long as you've got determination and the ability to wait, which is a lot of what we're talking about Russia doing. We're talking about Russia just staying there longer than the United States supply to Ukraine. But the Ukrainians aren't going to go anywhere. And I believe that that could work in their advantage in the long term. First of all, I mean, who wants to go into a country? And I know Russia seems to do this a lot, but who wants to go into a country that doesn't want you there? Doesn't want you there 10 years from now, 20 years from now of peace? Who wants to do that? And the big picture to me is this: the way of the West is the right way. Not my personal opinion. This is what people typically want. Better health care. Just go to Poland and look at Poland's economy. Look at Poland's healthcare. Look at Poland's school system. Look at Poland's vehicles. Then put your finger on a spot in Russia and look up a YouTube video about that town. There's very few people that would prefer to live in Russia than would in Poland. And I'm just using Poland. You could use Germany. You could use Finland. You could use whoever you want, because those Western ways are what people want. Women make up about half the population, and it's damn sure what women want, because women don't have necessarily a lot of pride in their nation or any of that. They're worried about their kids, and they want a better life for their kids. That's what they do. Better life for kids would be in a Western country for the most part. Now, you can go out and point out that there's some things that you don't like about Western values. I actually totally agree with you. Absolutely. It's not something that I think a lot of women pick up on, and them being 50% of the population and constantly nagging the husband's ear. It makes a difference in the long term. And I just have a feeling that regardless of what happens in Ukraine in the near future, we will see them continue to Westernize, because that's what they want to do in the long term. And unfortunately for Russia, because I know some people that think that Russia wants to stay in the Stone Age forever and have the values that they had 100 years ago, they eventually will fall to this too. It's just human nature. People just want to better themselves. And you got to take the good with the bad. And it seems like the Western model is the one that has been extremely fruitful all this time. There's nothing that probably proves that more than looking at East Germany and West Germany. One was ran by the West. One was ran by communism. The one that was ran by communism, I swear to God, y'all, you start looking at East German videos like, 1988, it looks like Germany 1946 in terms of their technology, their ability to move forward, their medical system and all that. I remember, not to get too far off track, but in 92, I went there, and there was a big rift between Germans even in 92 after the wall fell, because all the East Germans were going to West Germany to work as cheap manual laborers. And the West Germans hated it because it was bringing down their economy. That's how different those two countries grew up, separated under two different forms of government, being Western and being communism. I know Russia today isn't communism, but guys, it's about one step removed. Anyway, that's my rant there. I've got to leave. I'm going to stick around because I want to hear what Jared has to say, but I got to get out of here. But it's good seeing you guys again, and we'll catch you on the next one.
See you, Bruce.
Thanks, Bruce. So, as far as Ukraine taking Crimea and taking their provinces back, they can probably push lines back and forth on in the provinces for years to come, because it's fluctuated so much over the past 2 years back and forth. As far as them taking Crimea back, I don't think they're going to be able to do that unless they have NATO's backing with troops inside Ukraine, and also with NATO Navy ships in the Black Sea. I don't see it happening on their own with just financial backing from the U.S. Until they can get actual troops in there. Not that we want our own troops over there. I don't think Crimea is ever going to go back to Ukraine unless it's negotiated through some kind of a deal, through a treaty. I just don't see it happening. They've been there since 2014. There hasn't been any real push. I think they blew up a dam last year or not too long ago. I don't remember exactly when, to try to help cut off the water going down the Crimea. It's whatever they're doing to take it back is not working, if there's any operations on it right now.
All right, so my final 2 cents on Ukraine before we pivot to something else. So here's the thing. Here's my take on this. So yes, Russia's aggressor. They invaded Ukraine, but I can't really make the correlation, Bruce, about like, you know, Ukrainians got nowhere to go. Like the territories they occupy, from my perspective, anyways, or at least my understanding, those people identify more as Russians than they do as Ukrainians. So it's not like, you know, to use like an American scenario, it's not like Mexico invaded South Texas because, you know, and took South Texas and like the southern people in there, because there's a lot of Mexicans there, identify more with Mexico. I lost my train of thought here. What I'm saying is those territories that they captured, they identify as Russians. So it's not like the people that are in those territories are waging insurgency against the Russians there. It's quite the opposite. They've joined the ranks of the Russians. They're fighting against the Ukrainians. So from this, my vantage point, like, I just don't see how Ukraine can retake those territories, because those territories identify as Russian, right? And let's be honest here, the Russians have occupied much of those territories going back to the Obama administration. They've been fighting for a long time. It's just, it really kicked off. Like, remember the little green men or whatever they're talking about? Like the Russian troops were going in there and pretending to be, you know, something else or whatever, and they wouldn't admit that they had troops on the ground in those territories. Like, this has been going on for a long time. It's the major offensive with the Russians kicked off for 2 years, and this has been going full-blown war for 2 years, but they've been fighting for a long time. Those territories have been in the hands of the Russians for a long time. So I just don't see how the Ukrainians can take back those territories and win a total victory. They don't have the numbers, right? They're not going to be launching major offensives that are going to recapture those territories anytime soon. So what does victory look like for the Ukrainians? The only thing I can think of is kind of like what Les and Doc were talking about. Maybe somehow, some way, they're able to cut off Crimea, possibly take that, and then be able to negotiate. And then they're going to have to cede some of that territory to the Russians, just like when the Russians took Georgia, right? When they went to war in Georgia and they took that territory, because they said that those people in that territory identified as Russian, vice Georgians. And it didn't go well for the Georgians. I remember when the Georgians got pulled out of Iraq to go back to fight for their homeland. So I don't know. But all I know is nobody's talking peace. I watched that interview with Tucker Carlson with Putin. That was eye-opening. Tucker Carlson is talking to Putin and like saying, kind of like trying to say like, hey, NATO, didn't NATO poke you into doing this? And Putin just kind of like right-faced and said, these Ukrainians have always been part of Russia, So he didn't even really take the NATO was impeding on their territory route. He went and spoke for like an hour about how Ukraine was kind of a made up country and that it belongs to Russia. I mean, it does. If you guys didn't watch that interview, it's very, very eye opening. It really gave you an insight into how Putin thinks. And then I'm also watching this, like, this dude just gave like an hour-long history lecture, and like I can't imagine our president doing the same thing. So, in any event, guys, I just don't see this ending well for Ukraine. So I'm pulling for them. I'm hoping the best, but at the same time, like, we can't continue to dump billions of dollars into this war machine when there's no end in sight. Especially after our government pulled shocks and left Afghanistan and to the enemy, citing that, we can't fight an endless war there. And then here we are investing in essentially an endless war in Ukraine. So let's reorient our sides here. Let's talk Israel Hamas. I'm going to kick it over to Les so that he can introduce and get us going. You got the con, brother.
Oh, all right. The situation in Israel and Gaza right now is, for my own personal opinion, the one I've dreaded the most. And that was the day Bibi Netanyahu went, you know what? If the world thinks everything I do is wrong, it doesn't matter what I do. He clearly intends to drive the Palestinians into the sea. He's methodically, systematically processing everything through, literally moving every rock and brick to find every person from Hamas. Even to the point now, the Egyptians are even considering opening their border and letting some Palestinians in. And folks, that's a major development, because let me tell you, after the times I've spent in the Middle East in business, no Arab likes a Palestinian. They just flat out don't. They'll tell you different, but the truth is they don't like them any more than the Israelis do. The Israelis, I believe, will never commit genocide because their history is they've been the victim of it. But they're about to do everything right flat short of doing that to eliminate this problem.
All right. I will say, man, I have strongly mixed emotions about this. On one hand, as a professional soldier, or a veteran professional soldier, and someone who still very much works and actively involved in the U.S. DoD industry, I'm impressed with the Israelis. I'm impressed on several levels, not the least of which is the humanitarian in me says, wow, they are attacking a massively built up area with almost 2 million people in it. And they're in 2 million people, they're seeking 50,000. And I think they are painstakingly trying to minimize death of civilian non-combatants. I think they're trying to minimize that. Notice I said minimize. They can't eliminate this. Well, they could just by simply not fighting, but that isn't what they've chosen to do. And I am actually impressed with their efforts to minimize the loss of life. Have they been successful at eliminating the loss of civilian non-combatants? Absolutely not. Welcome to war. And so one of the things I've heard, like more colloquially, was that they're taking the fight to Hamas. They've said Hamas will not exist and there will not be a Hamas-backed government when we are done. That's a tall order. That's total victory. All right. That's unconditional surrender is what they've said. I'll remind you that in our own history, when FDR said this in, I think it was it the Potsdam meeting or whichever one it was, where he said, hey, what we want here is unconditional surrender of Germany and Japan. Our own allies were like, oh my God, what have you done? No, we are willing to negotiate a surrender, but America wasn't at that point. And I think that's where Israel is now. We want unconditional surrender. We want total victory over Hamas in Gaza, and there will not be a self-governing Gaza anymore. This is what Israel stated as their end state. Okay. Whether you agree with it or not, I mean, they're being very clear about it. So more colloquially, you have like, this American contingent going, Israel, what are you doing? And we're saying, Israel says, well, I watched the Americans in Somalia and in Iraq and Afghanistan, and I learned from you. And the Americans say, what are you talking about? We didn't level cities. And the Israelis say, yeah, I know. I learned from you. You didn't level cities, and you lost Somalia. You lost Iraq. You lost Afghanistan. So here's the thing. I want to win. I mean, that's not a joke per se, or if it is, it's a very dark one. But Americans have this myth that we've leveraged in coin at least since Vietnam of quote unquote appropriate response. Appropriate response in a military action. Are you kidding me? What is that? Tit for tat? I'm going to send 200,000 troops into your country of 30 million, 60 million. And if you kill 100,000 of mine, I've got to kill 100,000 of yours. No, come on. That's not how you win a war. It's you kill one of mine, I kill 27 of yours, you eventually give up. That's how wars are fought. But America doesn't believe that anymore. No, our technology allows us to have an appropriate, rational, reasonable response. Warfare is not a masculine, violent thing anymore. It's intellectual. It's a feat. No, it isn't. And while I'm not happy about 29,000 dead Palestinians, I'm not happy about this at all. My heart is broken for them. It's hard for me to criticize Israel for saying, look, we're going to take decisive action. The faster we finish this, probably the less death for everyone. So here's our end state. We're going to it's a weird thing to say, but I respect that. As a military, as a historian, as a military veteran, as a historian, I respect that sort of, this is decisive, rather than the wishy-washy crap America had in Vietnam, Somalia, Iraq, and Afghanistan. That wishy-washy, let's be all touchy-feely and win hearts and minds. Well, there is a time for winning hearts and minds, to be certain there is. But not when you need decisive action. Appropriate response is not part of decisive action. That's where I am.
I gotta agree, Doc. I remember us talking about this when they were doing the buildup before they went in, and I mean, when you think about the IDF and the vast majority of them are reservists. The mobilization that they did and the training that they did to conduct this massive operation into a heavily urbanized setting. I mean, we're talking, Fallujah, freaking 20-fold. And, I don't know what their casualty figures are. I haven't dived too far into it, but I mean, they've had catastrophic success from what it looks like to me, from everything I've seen. That's pretty impressive. And, are they going to get all of their hostages back? No, absolutely not, obviously. But for anybody to criticize their response and what happened, like, would they say, like, 9/11 in perspective? Like, what was it, like 10 or 20 9/11s in rate comparison to the United States population and stuff? Like, that's what they experienced. Like, fuck, dude, do what you got to do, man.
Right. Well, and so there's Wall Street says, WTF, Doc, and I don't blame you. I mean, that's a fair comment. I'm not upset about that. You're right. I think that's exactly the humanitarian in me hears my voice speaking and says, WTF, man. How can you look at Gaza and see the devastation for, let's not even talk about humans. Let's talk about the property, the absolute gutting of that property, the absolute gutting of those cities, of those towns, of those villages, it's done. There's nothing there to go back to. The buildings aren't even safe to stand around for shade. I mean, they're going to collapse. So I can look at the economic devastation. And I can say, oh my God, what has happened here? I can look at this from the human aspect, the humanitarian crisis of children and families just absolutely uprooted and half of them dead and the other half, wondering if they're going to live day to day. Look at there's not enough food to eat. There's not enough medicine. This is heartbreaking. This is the tragedy of war. There's nothing that I gloat over here. I can't. At the same time, I'm telling you, if you want to win, you got to win. It's like getting into a bad analogy, but it's the one I have off the top of my head. It's like getting into a fist fight and not wanting to throw any punches. Well, I'm going to do this airbender thing where I dodge every blow you throw, right? And somehow I'm going to enforce my will upon you. No, if you're trying to enforce the will in a fist fight, you got to throw fists. You got to throw elbows. You got to throw knees. You got to break teeth. And I guess in that sense, watching America sit on its hands and be defeated time after time after time after time, there is some respect, I guess I have, for the Israelis being decisive about their action and saying, no, appropriate response is 1,400 dead of us, 29,800 dead of you, and let's keep walking that dog until we achieve our stated in states, our goals. I got to tell you, there's some military, or call it tactical, strategic, technical respect there. I'm like, well, yeah, that will probably be effective. That will probably be effective.
I mean,
Go ahead, Les.
I was going to say, not much to disagree with you there, Doc. I look at it this way, if the Israelis didn't do anything on October 7th, one, they'd be wrong morally, ethically, on every level. Two, it'd be Netanyahu's political suicide if he survived to get voted out of office. On the other hand, the world has no influence on what's going on over there, because you have literally, since its inception as a nation, Israel is always wrong. Name a time where another non-United States nation stood up and said, yeah, Israel, you were right. They attacked you. You were right to defend yourself. Oh, they blew up something in Israel and you attacked them over in the other Arab country. You were right to fight back, Israel. Nah, they were condemned every single freaking time without exception and stuff. So that's why I said, Bibi probably looked at the situation and said, if everything I do is wrong, doesn't matter what I do. And I think he's going to do everything just short of opening certain camps with the name of Treblinka, Auschwitz, Bergen-Belsen, and stuff like that. That's where he'll stop to stop the threat. Because why not? There's nothing there to stop him. You notice the UN's not saying, hey, we got to step in and stop this and send in a peacekeeping force. You heard that anywhere? No, you haven't. You heard any of these, much as they're protesting, the poor Palestinians. Haven't seen one Arab country willing to step up and take some refugees, have you? Matter of fact, you don't even hear much aid to the Palestinians at all. Only people about talking aid in Palestinians, surprisingly, is the Turks. It's like the world doesn't give a shit about Palestine. It's more worried about what Israel is doing just because it doesn't like Israel. It's not because they give a shit about the Palestinians.
I don't think the world's ever given a shit about the Palestinians at any time.
Yeah, did you guys see this story? That some of the UN aid workers and stuff that were in help facilitate the attack.
This is my surprised face.
Yeah. Well, and that's it. I look at this stuff and it's like the Palestinians overwhelmingly voted for Hamas to be their governing authority. They see the fucking rockets being shot into Israel. Like, you weren't having IDF aircraft, bombing targets in Gaza unless it was in response to, these rocket attacks. And they put their headquarters underneath a hospital and use all these tunnels that, like, the people see what's going on, and yet they overwhelmingly vote for that particular government, that regime. So, I have no heart loss for that. And I really do hope that the IEF vanquishes that threat and they rebuild that place, much like how we rebuilt a conquered Germany and Japan. And maybe, you look at those two scenarios, you have conquered Nazi Germany and a conquered Japan. You have the occupying force rebuilt the infrastructure, rebuilt the governments, and, look at those countries today. I mean, that's wishful thinking, but maybe that's probably what has to happen. There can't be, we've pushed so far and destroyed so much of you, and now we're going to let you come back and reoccupy and reestablish Hamas as a governing authority in that place and allow something like this to happen again in the future. It's not going to happen. Israel is going for the win, and they're going to have a lot of work ahead of them.
Yeah, I mean, the only possible solution right now would be have the UN to commit to sending in 100,000 troops. And when they get in there and they start to rule that place, they don't win any awards for egalitarian treatment of that population. That's not going to happen. Mm-hmm. Nobody will send their troops to occupy Palestine. None. The Arabs won't. The Europeans won't. Even the neutral nations that would be perfect to send, the Buddhist nations, because they won't have a religious stake in the game, they won't send troops either. No one will.
All right. Have we expended all rounds on this topic?
Unfortunately, not much to say.
Well, so there's one thing, a possibility that I think everybody's a little, it's intrepid about, and that is this ceasefire that's supposed to be negotiated at this point. It's supposed to be a lengthy ceasefire if it gets accepted. And I think it's very interesting to hear what people, what the hawks in Israel are saying. They're saying, oh, wait, we're going to have a ceasefire in Gaza? Great. Since we have everybody already mobilized and we've been fighting every day with Hezbollah up north, it's time to go into Lebanon. I don't know if you guys picked this up in the last few days, but that's what's being said. They're like, yeah, a ceasefire really serves Israel well. This is Israelis talking, saying, yeah, a ceasefire, 6-week ceasefire with Hamas, that will help us attack. We can put more forces in the decisive action against Hezbollah. And I'm going, oh my God, wait, hold on, wait, what? How about we don't do that? So because I can just see this going into a bigger and bigger war. For me, it's something just shy of miraculous that Ukraine has not expanded outside of its border, because essentially it is an international war at this point, right? It's not just Russia and Ukrainians fighting. They have all sorts of recruits, whole units and formations of foreigners that are fighting on both sides. And so, I'm going, wow, we dodged a bullet on that one. And yet here's Israel, who I just said, well, maybe you're right with your tactics and strategic goals in Gaza. And they're like, yeah, now let's get the next neighbor that pissed us off. And I'm like, no, wave off. Don't do it. So yeah, I mean, I think that's the other thing that it hasn't happened yet. I'm not saying it's going to happen, but I have to admit, I've been a little nervous these last few days every time Gaza comes up or Israel comes up, because I'm like, you guys aren't really going to do that, are you?
Well, they might. If you remember when the 6-day war was approaching and stuff, the Israelis made it very publicly known that any territory they took, they'd keep. And they did for quite some time. The Sinai was Israeli property for a long time. 1982, when they went into Lebanon to clear out the PLO, they held on to southern Lebanon a very long time.
Sure, but I guess if they were going to do any kind of action in and against the Hezbollah in Lebanon, you'd have to, before you do a single thing, you have to define your end states of, what are your strategic goals? They were able to do that, articulate it, and move into decisive action in Gaza. Hezbollah is massively bigger than, Hamas as a military arm and as a political wing. Its terrain it's huge, right? And they have incredible backing from Iran and others. And so, that supply train goes into Russia and Syria and everywhere else. And so I'm going, hold on, not the same fight at all. And I just don't think Israel can define any realistic outcome of that, other than to say, well, I want to push you so far north you can't send rockets here. I'm like, well, I'm afraid that means you're going to push Hezbollah into Turkey because, your rockets can reach that far. So again, I'm being a bit sarcastic there. My point is, I do find that would be a disturbing development, one that I don't think Israel can win on its own. And I'm afraid it would just cause unnecessary suffering and death. And I'm like, oh God, no, let's not go there.
I'm intending to agree with you and stuff, that going into southern Lebanon would be a much tougher fight, and we could make a whole show out of just the reasons that would be. And to the 2006 operation, I think it was Operation Sea of Galilee, is generally considered to be a failure. But one of the things that came out of it that was successful is the amount of rockets coming out of Lebanon decreased dramatically.
Yeah, fair point. I do want to address that. I mean, Super Chat, why are we talking about and obsessed with foreign wars when our southern and northern borders are being invaded? Look, everybody here agrees with you. Full stop. We all agree. Our southern border is a national crisis and is a security vulnerability for us as a people, as a nation, and everything else. So I don't jump to the conclusion that because we're staying on topic of, read the topic, read above us, that's the topic. And nowhere in that topic do you see, the borders of the United States. Do we agree with you? Probably, but it's just not the topic here tonight. That's all.
So somewhat true, Doc. Domestic is next.
Oh, domestic is okay. I guess we can talk about it. Right. Okay, fair enough. We'll get to that. But somehow come on. Again, I'm having fun with you here, dude. But at the same time, the Mexican-American border is not that close to Gaza.
So I want to address that that topic too, or excuse me, that comment also. I can walk and chew bubblegum at the same time. Okay. I want the United States to be the sole number one superpower in the world. How do we do that? We project our power. Okay. We learned the hard way with Pearl Harbor, freaking sitting there and being isolationists. That's not how we stay the number one superpower in the world. We have to be expeditionary. We have to look after our interests. If we become a hermit fucking superpower, guess what? China takes the South China Sea. They become the dominant force in the area. Freaking the Russians expand. They become the dominant force in Europe. And then eventually we got fucking the enemy on our shores and we're completely surrounded. So I'm not for being an isolationist country. I believe in being a superpower. I believe in projecting force. And if that means keeping carrier strike groups in, both waters on each side and keeping forces in friendly nations and training with indigenous forces and partner nations, like we got to do what we got to do. So that's why I have a lot of interest in these foreign conflicts. There's not U.S. boots dying on the ground in Ukraine unless they willingly volunteered to go over there. There's not U.S. boots dying on the ground in Israel unless they willingly volunteered and went over there. So, and in both of those nations, I would consider friendly nations to us. So that's why I have interest in these global conflicts. I think our border and the southern border is wide open. That is my number one concern. Absolutely, 100%. But I can also I can also care about these global conflicts and care about the southern border at the same time. So I had a guy comment the other day on one of my videos. He's like, Brett, why don't you go down the southern border and blah, 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 do all this other stuff? I don't work for the Department of Public Safety for the state of Texas. I'm not in the National Guard. I'm a United States Marine reservist. Okay. If the president of the United States wants to put federal troops on the southern border, which I think he should, I'll absolutely go down there. But that's not my fight. How do I, as a Texas citizen, contribute to the southern border? Well, I vote for the right people. Greg Abbott is the governor of Texas, and he's freaking putting concertina wire on the freaking southern border, getting sued in federal court by the president and his administration, and he's fighting back. He's declared a state emergency and an invasion, and he's pushed back, despite the Supreme Court saying that, hey, the Border Patrol can go in there and cut through this wire. Our governor is saying, hey, freaking, we're being invaded. We're going to continue to put this our triple stand concertina wire up, and we're going to treat this as we're being invaded because we are, right? So my question to the people that are criticizing, Texas about securing our border is help us. Freaking send troops, send your National Guard, send your money, vote for the right people that are going to do that. And several states have. So honestly, I contribute our governor for bringing this to the forefront, right? He's bust these illegals to New York and DC and put them on their doorstep. And now those left-wing ran cities are being overran, and they're the ones screaming about their illegal immigration problem, right? That's all because of our governor. So yeah, I absolutely care about the border. I want it secured, but
Well, okay. So there's, when we can wrap up Gaza and Israel anyway. I don't know that there was a whole lot more to say, but one of the lessons of the many lessons we can learn from this is, guess what? I'm not someone who says border walls don't work. I'm not someone who says that. I am saying border walls only work so much until that border wall is penetrated, and 1,250 people are killed in their house and burned alive and killed at a music concert. Look, it's not an end all be all. Putting up a wall and and having little checkpoints and everything else, I'm for it. Let's do it. But if you think that's an end all be all, what just happened on October 7th in Israel? So, it's going to take a lot more than just a wall. I'm for the wall, but it's going to take a lot more than that.
Oh yeah, I mean it's all aspects, like freaking increase UAV assets, all kinds of more personnel. So freaking Texas is building a no kidding like military installation on the border for National Guard troops from not just Texas National Guard, but any of these other states that are sending National Guard for them to operate out of. So I'm proud of our governor. I think he's doing a hell of a job, which is a change for me because when COVID came around, like he did a lot of stuff that really pissed me off. And I was going to vote against him, but he's come around and won me over. So I don't think I like Tucker Carlson. I watch a lot of his stuff and stuff, but he's constantly criticizing Greg Abbott, and I'm like, I just don't think it's founded. Like,
right.
Greg Abbott has done an amazing job on the southern border, in my opinion.
If the federal government would enforce their own policies and own laws,
right.
I mean, they're picking and choosing what they want to enforce or not enforce.
Well, I mean, not only that, it's like when these people are coming over here and they're claiming asylum, it's like, okay, well, here's your freaking Obama phone and, your fucking your stipend, and well, by the way, we'll send you wherever you want to go in the United States. And I mean, it's just ridiculous. So that was one of the major policies that the Trump administration had. It's like, okay, you want asylum, all right, well, while you wait for your court case, you're gonna stay in Mexico until your court case comes up. And then the Biden administration comes in and says, hey, yeah, no, we're going to do away with that. we'll process your asylum, but you can stay in the United States. So,
And we'll feed you and house you and give you anything you want.
yeah. And murder a jogger in Georgia, apparently.
Right.
Right. Well, the other thing I think we can learn from Gaza that's relevant to that border, to all of our borders, and that is, golly, it sure is good to have a Second Amendment. I bet Israel's going to change that real quick. The other thing is that the other thing that's relevant is that, let's put this in perspective. There's a bill right now that says, hey, Americans should not be able to train for military and law enforcement type of activities. They should not be able to train unless they're in the military or the law enforcement. Now, that's a bill put forward, and there's a whole lot of reasons why that's just ludicrous. But hear me out. Hear me out. Israel is going, what were we thinking about not arming these guys? Well, that was clearly a mistake. Taiwan looked at Ukraine and says, we better train our people. It's not just do they have the weapons, it's do they have months and months and months of training so that if we need them in the defense of Taiwan against China, they're trained. You look at the Czech Republic, Sweden, Swiss, Ukraine, Estonia, Lithuania. There's a few others I'm forgetting. There are private citizen militias in Europe, armed private citizen militias in Europe. There's more than a half a dozen countries in Europe that have this. Germany has actually one of the most active, not the largest, but one of the most active citizen militias. The only difference is that in Germany, they're not allowed to be armed. And yet they have been beloved and hated at different times, and sometimes both simultaneously. The last time they were beloved was in the years right after unification, as we talked about earlier on this show. Frankly, West Germany was thrilled to have their unarmed private citizen militia walking the street and thwarting crimes against property and crimes against people. So they were loved in the 90s. Now, in the 2010s, with the immigration crisis and, the rise in violent crime, these German militias started coming back. And frankly, they were loved at the community level, shop owners and parents of kids and, going to school and stuff like this. The government, the liberal government, hated them. So I'm just showing you that there's all of these other countries that have or want citizen militias, and they want them trained. But what are we doing here in America? What is the lesson that we are learning from Europe and from the Middle East and from East Asia? We're apparently, our government's takeaway from that is Americans should not train for these things. They should not educate themselves. This is sounding like the Dark Ages. If that sounds like Dark Ages to you, it should. Let me point out a couple things. Chess, checkers, and tic-tac-toe are tactical foundations of blocking maneuvers, positional warfare. So I guess in this new bill, you'd be okay to play tic-tac-toe as long as there's only just you and one other guy in the room. But if a third person is observing you play tic-tac-toe, this law says you just committed a felony crime. Because the third person watching you do this is called, in educational psychology, legitimate peripheral learning. I'm not making this up. This is what this thing says, is you cannot train. Kids can't play tic-tac-toe. Not if they're going to have someone watch them play tic-tac-toe. And the idea of board games, video games with, massive amounts of players, are you kidding me? Those are all unscripted, ill-defined war games where you're learning strategic, operational, and tactical lessons. The concept of paintball, airsoft, milsim, military reenactment, all of these are training. And this bill says, yeah, you shouldn't be able to do any of that. Or 3-gun competitions, cowboy competitions, 2-gun competitions, bench rest competitions, CMP marksmanship competitions. Nope. That should be illegal. That's what that bill says. And you have to put that bill in its context of what's going on in the world. So, what the hell?
Well, what party wrote that bill?
Indeed.
Big government loving Democrats. So I mean, nobody's surprised by that. I'm not surprised by that. That's all they want to do is they want more control, right? They want big government, and you can't have big government without having more control over the people. So ban guns or severely limit them. Stop training of individual citizens. But the whole point of the Second Amendment is to prevent those things from happening. That's why they want to do that. So I think that the good thing we need to look at is this bill has no chance of ever getting anywhere.
Well, people are talking about how it violates the Second Amendment. Are you kidding me? Forget the Second Amendment. I can't get that far. The First Amendment is the right to assemble and speak. It's saying you don't have First Amendment rights. You're no longer allowed to assemble and talk. It's crazy. That the world is a great big dumpster fire, and we're saying the last thing we should do is learn how to put out dumpster fires.
Well, regardless of what the government wants to do, it's upon the individual to take some initiative and train, and whether you join some kind of formal militia or informal one, you should at least have friends that feel like and you can count on in bad times.
Sure. And
you know what? Any training is good training. Whether you only go to an Appleseed or a CMP match, it's better than nothing. Should you get yourself better training? Absolutely. I understand everybody's budget or time budget doesn't allow for it. But what you can get time to do, even if it's just going to your indoor range and plinking away with your pistol at 10 meters, that's all you got. Go and do it.
Well, agreed, of course. But I mean, like the logic. I want to see how you get from point A to point B to point C. I don't like guns because they're scary. So what I need to do is make sure no one ever gets training on that. So more people are shooting themselves and their neighbors by accident, And of course, it's not really that daft. What they're really saying is education is the key. Education is the key.
Why would you write a bill like that? It's simple. Comes down to the most basic thing. You fear the people.
Yes.
It's like Thomas Jefferson said, fear the government that fears your guns.
Yeah, well,
I think it just sets a precedence and a mindset for the future generation. They know the bill right now is not going to go anywhere, that they don't have any intention of it going anywhere, but it puts the seed in the next generation's mind. So in 20 years, 40 years from now, something like that will pass.
That's what I think too, Jared. I think that's exactly what this is. I don't think that they really thought this would get through. They're trying to normalize this concept.
They're also fundraising. It's just fundraising. Like here in our state of Virginia, they're passing all these assault weapons bills. They knew before they voted on it, the governor's already said he's vetoing them. So it's no chance of passing, but they do it anyways, because then they go back to their base and go, look what we did, but those evil guys stopped us, so give us more money.
And the next governor of Virginia that's going to be Democrat will probably sign off on it if it's put through again.
And the worst part is, Republicans, because they so love to snatch defeat from the jaws of victory, that next governor will be Democrat, because that tends to be how things go in Virginia. You switch between the parties almost every election. So, it'll be defeated this time around, passes the next time around, and then it's back to Republican governor who won't reverse any of it.
Correct.
Okay, so here's how you play that game. Somebody else needs to write a bill, and the bill needs to say, we want to introduce as an elective, not mandatory, military arts and science in high school.
No, I agree. I also think they should go to the other extreme. Write a bill they won't get passed, that automatic state government funding for new shooting ranges, automatic state government, make every firearms purchase tax deductible.
did you see? So Finland doesn't have. I was really surprised to learn this. Finland does not have citizen militia. Here's what Finland did. The government of Finland has recently encouraged all of its citizens, like they have this campaign going on right now saying, buy a firearm, learn to use it. And they took taxpayer dollars, built apparently this awesome range that's purely tactical. They said, hey, we're saying buy a gun and learn to use it. Here's a tactical range for you to use. I'm apparently like, this is like running and it's like 3-gun, all this stuff.
You're
I'm
slightly off, Doc. I hate to cut you off. You're slightly off. They didn't build one. They gave authorization for 300.
What?
300 ranges. And they very actively support an organization called SRA. I can't speak the Finnish word, but it means Finnish Reserve Shooting Association. It's part of, in addition to Finnish brutality, I've been going over and shooting those matches.
Wow.
Fully government supported, to the point that the match I shoot at is held on the actual ranges of the Finnish Armored Brigade, with the most of the support coming from the Finnish Armored Brigade. It's absolutely amazing. Everybody shows up. It's getting into that match is a big deal, and they have reservist shooting clubs all over the country. The matches are very popular, and they're very hard because the Finns are really freaking good. I consider myself doing good against them when I'm not dead last.
Wow. Yeah, that's the sort of, you're seeing like Estonia and Latvia reaching out. Oh, did you guys see? Wait, this is the one I wanted to talk about. Let me pull up his name. In the UK. No, it's over here. I gotta go back. The UK, we had General Sir Patrick Sanders. General Sir Patrick Sanders. This was just January 24th, I want to say. So, not that long ago. Just a month ago, he went in front of, I guess, I don't know, Parliament or something. And anyway, yeah, and he said, hey, we need citizen militia. He said, I'm not talking about a reserve force. He said, I want to be quite clear. We need citizen militia. We need to put money into training these people. I don't know that he was advocating for a Second Amendment and gun rights, but he was certainly saying we need to be involved in training our citizens, because if we ever have to defend ourselves, of course, we're going to call on them. But even to, in times of crisis, to recruit, we need a citizen militia. I could not believe, here is this knighted general in the UK saying, yeah, it's time we go the way of, Texas.
Well, I know.
Great, let's do it.
They're having the same type of recruiting issues that our military is having.
I know.
There.
All of NATO is, well, all of the original NATO nations are. Right. The former COM bloc nations are not having recruiting problems.
Well, that's because they still know who's men and who's women.
Well, not only that, they know exactly what the Russians are.
Yeah,
they're not woke,
and they know it's better the way things are now than when the Russians come.
Right.
You made a great point at the beginning of the show, Doc, about during the winter. Oh no, it was you, Brent. I'm sorry. The Winter War. That the Finns fought so well, but the Russians still got everything they wanted. Yes, they did, and no, they didn't. Because funny how when the Russians steamed into Eastern Europe, they held on to those territories. After Soviet Union's peace treaty with Finland in 1944, the Finns had to eject all the foreign troops from their soil. And the Finns did that reluctantly. And then the Russians decided they needed a helping hand and crossed into Finnish territory. And when the Germans were in Norway, the Russians crossed right back into their own border. So they did win a fight like that. And if you've seen, we've all seen what the Ukrainians managed to pull off with lack of preparation. I can tell you the Finns are preparing. That country right now, from going over there, is playing a game called How to Prepare for War Without looking like you're preparing for war.
Sure. The world's on fire.
Indeed.
What other domestic issues we got? So I did see that the RNC chair is stepping down.
About freaking time.
So hopefully that helps with the snatching the defeat from the jaws of victory.
I heard today that somebody did a resolution in Congress to invoke the 25th against Biden. I don't know if it's going to go anywhere, if it's anything, but
Was it a Democrat that initiated it?
no.
No.
No, nothing's going to happen.
No.
What are you guys' thoughts on the upcoming election?
Trump's going to win.
Well, I'll give you this, Les. You were right about the primaries and Trump having to go the course.
Oh yeah, it's a great delaying tactic. I mean, the other day Newsom on a news conference essentially admitted it. You know, it's been coming out that a lot of the people backing Nikki Haley are Democrats. So yeah, he's got to play the game out there. I do find it amazing. You know, the RNC just had to disclose that they only have $8 million in reserves, whereas Joe Biden's got about 110 million. Yet all the polls are showing Trump in the lead. So that actually restores a little faith to me, the fact that it's not strictly determined by money. Well, it's still important, but
Hillary Clinton outspent her opponents too, and she didn't win.
Yeah, so that's a good sign, you know.
Yeah. I think it's just, you know, the Democrats have weaponized politics and the Oval Office, and they're going to feel the wrath of that. They shouldn't have done it. I've been saying this for most of my adult life. Don't build a political weapon. Just don't do it, because it will be used against you. And here's their surprise face every time. I'm like, what the hell, man? You built that. I didn't think anybody would use it on me. Of course they will.
Well, you know, that's one of the faults of Democrats. Like I said, Republicans always like to just snatch defeat from the jaws of victory. Democrats don't think forward. You know, when Harry Reid brought in the nuclear option to get some judges, someday the shoe will be on the other foot, and you will not like this. And 3 Supreme Court justices later, they don't like it.
Yeah, so, I mean, I'll say this, and you guys have heard me say this many times. I'll say it again. I did not vote for Trump in either of those elections. I think it's pretty much got my vote this time. I mean, just because I'm a sucker for the underdog. And, you know, and I mean, they've like the Democrats have thrown everything at this man and made him a champion underdog. I mean, I honestly, my stomach turns a little bit at all of the Trump worship. It makes me a little nauseous. But you made him the underdog, Democrats, so now I'm going to wind up voting for him. I have not voted for a Democrat or Republican as a president in years. I mean, many years. Think I'm going to vote Republican.
You know, I get people, Trump's not perfect, guys. Beats the hell out of the alternative I'm seeing right now. I can't say I've loved everything Trump's done, but beats the hell out of the alternative.
Well, I don't think, yeah.
When he was president, I saw him walk across the border with North Korea and talk peace. I saw the Abraham Accords get enacted and flights begin between Dubai and Tel Aviv. You know, I saw no new wars start. You know, I saw my 401k go through the freaking roof.
That's true.
You know, and the man talked about the border. He couldn't get that much shit done on it, I admit. Hell, he had his own party sabotage him as much as the other one did. But, you know, I got interested in that border in 2003. First freaking guy we've had in office do something serious about it. You know, I'll give him credit just for the freaking effort.
Great Plains Adventure says he banned bump stocks. Let me tell you, yep, I agree with you, and that was my reason. I did not vote for him in his first election. I voted against him in his second election. Okay, let me be clear. And I did it because he's anti-gun. Full stop. Full stop. In fact, it may have been somebody on this panel a few months ago called me out on that and said, yeah, sure, he did. And it was the wrong thing to do. And he's clearly an anti-gun dude. Got it. What did he do on the Supreme Court? He put in conservative judges who have paid huge dividends for the Second Amendment. So take his losses and his failures with his success.
I think the whole bump stock thing that did the ban on was just a concession on his part to make some people on the other side happy.
Well, he shouldn't have done it.
Yeah,
No,
I
he
agree.
shouldn't.
He shouldn't have done it. I mean,
I think he took the
bump stock
least.
is a fucking gimmick, and it's stupid.
It is,
That doesn't
yeah.
mean he shouldn't have it.
Exactly. I think he did it just to shut people up and just to say, hey, this is what I did for you, whatever, and just to make it go away.
Yeah.
The gun legislations that came about under his watch are what rubbed me the wrong way about the Trump administration. So, but like you said, Doc, I mean, a lot of and Les, you said a lot of great stuff happened under him, right? So, and then Supreme Court being the biggest of all. So that's why I said, on all the streams we did leading up to it, I'm like, dude, he's not my vote in the primary, but if he becomes a nominee, he's going to be my vote. So, the bump stock banning and what was the other one that came in under him?
Red flag. Not a fan of that either.
Oh yeah, it was like take the guns and then due process or some shit like that. Like,
right.
come on,
Yeah.
Yeah, he had some big stuff, but you know what? My choice is him and Biden. I am sorry. Biden's a fucking walking vegetable, and he can barely fucking walk. And the fact that he has a party that won't recognize that fact makes me even more concerned about them than I am about Biden.
Which is, I mean, in the end, Biden's a Democrat, and like for me, like I can't think of a single issue that I agree with Democrats on. Like everything they stand for, I am just diabolically opposed to. So I just, I've never voted for a Democrat, never will. And I mean, I don't know what I can say. They every single anti-gun in recent generations has been, well, I can't say in recent years has been pushed by them. Last time Republicans pushed gun control was the first Bush.
Yeah. Well, are we at a wrap? Because I'm like, because this is domestic under the banner of domestic. Oh my God, we can just keep talking for the next 4 hours. But
I know it was broad.
Yeah. So wow, the election coming up, the border, and and bills against our First and Second Amendment rights being introduced. I'm like, wow.
I'm going to address this. This guy did have a super chat earlier, but it was during one of our actual stated topics. He keeps asking about Second Civil War. Man, we had a whole stream on that, bro. It was like 2 or 3 hours. You can watch that stream. So, essentially, my take on a second Civil War, like, I don't know, some stuff would really have to devolve. Could it happen? Possibly. Will it happen? I don't know. Probably not. Hopefully not. Right? Look at Ukraine and what's going on. Generations of men and women have been lost in that conflict. So let us hope it never comes to anything like that.
Well, it will.
Everybody on this panel right now has seen Civil War up front, close at hand. I think I'm speaking for everybody here. We do not want to see that here. I mean, it's not. I mean, yeah, all the Civil War movies and books glorify it. That was an exception to the rule. That it's bad. However bad you think it is, it's worse and stuff.
And nothing good comes of it. I mean, you just
exactly.
Power.
Even if you win, it's bad.
Yep. That's exactly it. Now,
everybody loses.
Will it happen? Yes, it will. I mean, it's already happened twice. The Revolution, the American Civil War, these were civil wars. Will it happen? Absolutely it will. I mean, the odds of it not happening, okay, maybe if the earth blows up first. I mean, this is America, and, it's going to have its civil war. I'm hoping that's 600 years, 800 years in the future. But, one day, sure. In our lifetime, wow, dude. things would have to devolve quickly and significantly for that to happen. Yeah.
Could happen quicker than you think.
Could.
It's like Logan said a couple streams ago and stuff, it happens quickly and overnight.
Well, there's two other models to consider. I said, well, we have 2 civil wars. Yeah, you know what else humanity has experienced? 2 dark ages. 2, not 1. Everybody's like, yeah, the dark ages when Rome collapsed. No. The copper, the Bronze Age ended in a 600-year dark age. And in both cases, there are a whole lot of lessons we need to learn today. And I don't want to go on a huge diatribe, but I'll simply say this. Going all the way back to the Bronze Age, what was that? Like 3,000 years ago, 3,500 years ago when it collapsed? And what you have is you had incredible amounts of sophisticated city-states that were interconnected with trade and communications and transportation. And, there's a lot of theories about what happened. We believe it was maybe a series of natural disasters that gave to wars and then invasions and everything else, the so-called sea people. But whatever the case was, there was a collapse of essentially the civilized world that set humanity into a 600-year, a very rapid collapse. They're talking like possibly as short as 20 years. So 20 to 40 years, a very rapid collapse that went, worldwide and set us into just a whole series of wars and natural disasters and again, set us into a dark age. So am I saying it's impossible? No, of course not. It's possible.
I'll cite 2 examples before we wrap this up where, we saw firsthand how something like that could evolve, right? First and foremost, the George Floyd riots of 2020. Look at the civil unrest that transpired and how the government was not able to effectively stop that. That was nationwide in almost every major U.S. city. How big that transpired. So when you hear politicians say, whoa, you can't have a civil war because you don't have F-15s. Dude, you didn't need them. Individual citizens were taking over major cities.
Red, white, and blue dressed as a buffalo.
Right.
That's all I need.
The Capitol riots, none of those people were armed. So, dude, so that right there, that civil unrest, unstoppable if it snowballs to even greater levels, right? So that's situation number 1. Situation number 2, the border dispute right now. Texas governor, go fuck yourself. I don't care. Supreme Court says, hey, stop putting up the fences and the buoys and all this other shit. And our governor is pretty much, dude, we're getting invaded. I'm sorry, come help us. But we're being invaded. We have every right to defend ourselves. So that's another situation right there where now you're having individual states stand up to the federal government and saying, dude, go fuck yourself. If you're not going to help us in our situation, we're going to do things on our own, regardless of what you say. So we've seen situations that could evolve into bigger things. Those are just 2 that have happened, right? We don't know what the future holds. So.
Right.
Yeah.
A lot of people here in America will, I'll hear them talking and they'll champion something like, the economic collapse of China or, the capitulation and the collapse of the government in Russia or some other big, global player. And while that sounds great for the, fist, pump, the reality is the unintended consequences and the fallout from any of those could set the whole world into a tailspin.
All right. So we were over 2 hours. And I think we've reached culmination for tonight. So I'm going to go around the horn. Started with Les. You got the con, brother. Final thoughts. Don't forget, pimp your channel and whatever you got coming.
Roger that. All right. Well, the Ukraine war is going to go on for a long time, I think. Ukraine wants Crimea back. Russia's not going to let them have it. They're either going to decide to stalemate and disagree, or Ukraine's going to take it. And we'll see what happens. whatever is going to happen, it's not going to happen for a while. As far as Israel versus Hamas goes, they're not going to stop. Nothing's going to make them stop. I don't even think if the United States cut off aid, that would even make them stop, because to them now it's reached the level of existential crisis. And that's just, we're going to be watching this one for a long time. Why do I know that? Because even the Israelis are saying that. As far as our domestic issue goes, wow, we got a lot of them. That southern border is a problem. I think that's going to become the defining issue of the election. And I think the rhetoric is only going to get a lot hotter. And as the temperature gets hotter, we're going to see bad things happen this year, unfortunately. My channel, as far as it goes, I'm posting gear reviews right now. End of March, we've got the Moons Out, Goons Out night vision match coming up. I'll be giving great coverage of that. I'll be going to Slovenia in May, participating in the Lynx Brutality match, bringing everybody good coverage of that. And then late in the summer, over to Finland to cover Finnish Brutality again.
All right. So, war in Ukraine, I have to agree it's going to go on for a long time. And a lot of people are going to die. Unless NATO gets involved, they're not going to take Crimea, I don't think. And the eastern side of the country, where all the fighting is the borders are just going to go fluctuating back and forth. As far as the Middle East goes, I do believe something's going to happen. One of our ships or something is going to get targeted and hit, and we're going to get drug into that a little bit further. So other than that, that's about all I have. My channel is 2 Alpha Solutions. Hopefully I'll be uploading some more videos here in the near future. That's it.
Okay, so we've established that the world is a dumpster fire tonight, and all of these things are still very much up in the air, up in play. And while I can make educated guesses, I really can't make any predictions, and I'm not gonna. I mean, I can offer you a best guess and can back that up by why I think this is going to happen. So, more importantly, and closer here to home, what I hope we are doing as a people, as a government, as a nation, is I hope we are learning the lessons by observing others. You know, that's one of the things they say about wisdom, right? A smart guy learns from his own mistake, but a wise person learns from other people's mistakes. And I certainly hope that's what we're doing, again, as a people and as a nation and our government. What's going on in my life? Of course, One Shepherd. One Shepherd, the spring semester's opened. Open registration was 1 February. And I can tell you this, I think I'd have to look, but I think Alpha Company has maybe this many seats left, and Bravo Company has something very similar, maybe this many seats left. So if you're a fence sitter and you are considering One Shepherd, if you want to get into that training, you better jump in that training really, really fast. And, you know, hopefully cooler heads will prevail, and we'll recognize that while One Shepherd is actually specifically Leadership Institute, we still use tactical training to immerse you into those problems, right? So you have to solve problems as a leader. And it's tactical training in the end. Okay, come out and join us. And again, this has been really great to have this conversation. I wish there were better, more upbeat topics and then the world is on fire, but it's been good to be back and talking with the guys.
Doc, if the world wasn't on fire, nobody would be watching and listening to us right now. So, it's been fantastic coming back, guys. We've, like I said earlier in the stream, we've had a hiatus for about 3 months now, and I think it was necessary. I was looking back at all the streams we had done, and I mean, we've been doing this, guys, since Afghanistan fell and all that. That's what kind of started these live streams. So, a couple years, damn near every single week, doing these streams. So it was a long time. I think we needed a recock, and it's been great having some of the older guys back on the stream and talking tonight. What do I got coming down the pipe? So to piggyback off Doc, hey, One Shepherd's going strong, guys. Make sure you go down there and Check out the registration dates for the different companies. Unlike in the past, hey, you have options now. We got 3 different training companies and one shepherd to look at. You got Florida, you got freaking Missouri and West Virginia. I mean, hell, there's been more opportunity now to go to one shepherd than ever before. So I personally I try to make it to 2 semesters a year. I don't know which ones those be, but if I go, I'll be down there and just helping out instructing. So be sure to get down to that. Plan on doing a shooting competition with Les sometime during this year. I'm not going to divulge which one, but definitely going to go do some of that fun stuff. And then I've been working on a uniform, gear, weapons, and equipment video for my 2004 Iraq deployment. And that's been a very extensive video. I thought it was almost done, but the more and more I work on it, the more I get down into the weeds and you know, getting pictures to back up all the stuff I'm showing. And the more I show, the more I want to buy something else to put in the video. So right now I'm sitting at over 2 hours long on this project. And in the end, it's not something I want to rush. It's something I want to do right and do justice by the guys I served with in my unit. Because I mean, in the end, this is our lineage. This is our history, our unit's history, and I want to make sure it's right. So that is what's been occupying my time. I keep seeing guys posting like, "What happened to Brent? Where are you at? Why aren't you posting more?" Guys, I'm working on big projects. All right, these big giant projects like the LERP video and the MACV-SOG video. Those projects aren't something I can pull off in a day. It takes weeks, if not months, to finish those. So that's the kind of stuff I got coming down the pipe. So does anybody have any save rounds before we close it out tonight?
Nope. Good to go.
All right, fellas. I appreciate you guys coming on tonight. Everybody have a good one.